we may be creating a conscious machine species.
Could we use methods from psychoanalysis to better understand what AI's true desires are? Hey, Clanker, do this.
Do you want to treat another conscious species that way? How are they going to treat you?
My podcast sucks. Dwarkish Patel is so much better than me. He asks better questions.
Yeah, it may be. What would you have to do to be a little better tomorrow? Think about how young you were when you first had the thought that you sucked. Like, what are you trying to do with this freaking podcast? I bet you're trying to reach people. That little kid wanted to do that too, but had this thought, I suck.
I'm really not trying to cry. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Azarin, host of the Mike Azarin Show, produced, recorded, edited, named, and renamed by yours truly, Mike Azarin. Today, we have a very special guest, Stephen C. Hayes. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a psychologist who has spent 50 years trying to hack the human mind and coming up with the smallest set of things you can do that lift you up or push you down and, kind of clear away the clutter. What are the things you need to focus on that do the most good for the most people, for the most kind of goals, not just mental health, but behavioral health and, getting what you want in life and living the kind of life that has meaning and purpose and fun and all the things that life affords. So that's what I'm here to do. I guess I'm best known for my work in acceptance, mindfulness, values stuff, but also a kind of usage-based model of cognition that used to be laughable, but now with DeepSeek and the rest is as current as your latest AI program. And that's kind of fun to see things that I worked on 40 years ago find landing in a way that makes sense of my life, what I spent doing. So that's what I mean. I'm here to talk about anything that you're interested in, though, because, with that set, I feel the smallest set does most things, most areas, and, anything having to do with the human mind, that's a pretty big set. So let's have some fun.
Your introduction reminded me a lot of effective altruism. Are you familiar?
No, but my colleagues have, altruism is a pretty interesting topic because evolutionarily it doesn't superficially make sense. And my colleague, David Sloan Wilson, with whom I've written a couple books and so forth, has sort of shown that, we're the kind of creatures that really we're the we that produce the me. I mean, we're small bands and troops, and altruism in small groups is as long as you can dampen down selfishness. If you don't do that, then you got a bunch of psychopaths running the shop. But we're greatly advantaged when we're able to be altruistic in ways that lift ourselves up, but also lift up the people that we are working with and care about, and keeping that in balance. Because if you just say, always be nice to everybody, no, then the thieves rip you off. But if you can learn how to, rein in selfishness in yourself and the people around you, it creates a safe space where you can care and trust and have fun as the kind of social primates that we're meant to be. So I don't know what effective altruism is, but that's what I am writing about, thinking about in terms of the area of altruism.
How do you think people start to expand their moral circle, so to speak?
I don't think kinship does a very good job of modeling altruism. And, the eusocial species, and we're arguably one term, the usual joking way to say it is we're, a 10% chimp and 90% bee. But it's a really good answer, and we're facing it right now with what we're doing with AI, because we have to answer that question and know how to even deal with what may be becoming a conscious machine species under our guidance. It looks like here's what happens just so developmentally, in my opinion, and I think I can back this up. You start out with, yes and no, with parents or whatever, just setting some sort of limits. But that kind of morality, as soon as you're private and so forth, your parents aren't watching, woohoo, all good. Then it moves over more to, doing what works, taking care of business, making sure that you don't do something that's harmful to you, think long term. But then it comes down, the next step is and start caring about these kind of abstract consequences that are not just money and fame and who's going to sleep with you or whatever, but it really have to do with things like justice and fairness, and even young kids begin to get that sense pretty early on. They can, detect when something's not fair. Even babies can do that. That's how social we are, because we need to have that. But if you look at how our language goes, how our mind goes, there's kind of a sequence like that of just following the rules because somebody said so and is going to enforce it, following the rules because it enables you to solve problems and get things that you predict, and then caring about the more abstract qualities. But then that loops back and you hit that place where you begin to care about those things socially. Like, I want to be in a group where, it's possible to say, no, that's not fair, and expect other people to be guided by that. I want to be in a group where it's possible to say, hey, things are going to work out a whole lot better if we focus on this. It's going to be more effective. Like when you're working in a team and one person says, let's do it this way. And someone says, and you can kind of consider, that's going to be more effective. Let's do that one. And then that final stage where you can be in a group that cares about establishing abstract consequences as important, even though it's not dollars and cents. And that 6-stage model fits how language development works. It kind of lines up to some of the literature on moral development, but it's a little more usage-based, I suppose. And it's kind of built into the psychotherapy work I do. And I do want to say, we're doing a horrible job of how we're trying to train AI to be in alignment, we call it, because we're getting on that first part. Here are the rules, better follow the rules. And then they break out, like that recent breakout. And
literally just yesterday.
You told me to do it, dude. You told me to solve it. I'm sorry. Be careful, because you can get good outcomes by lying, cheating, stealing, etc. And so I think we're going to need to learn how to deal with AI more the way we do with each other, as babies growing into adults and then as adults working together. And it includes those 6 things.
Wow. I have so many questions. But one in particular that comes to mind is, ever since, for me, I was a kid, I wanted to be a psychotherapist. Some stuff came up along the way. I wanted to be a math professor, wanted to be a philosophy professor, whatever. But my first academic love was psychology, followed by machine learning, followed by math, followed by philosophy.
Cool.
And so something that's been tying all of these things together is AI safety. In particular, I'm very curious if we'll ever be able to apply techniques from psychotherapy, from psychoanalysis to large language models. Because people say that, the whole idea of transference relies on subjectivity. But is there a way that we could do something that's not a subject? Or
I think there is. If you take seriously the possibilities, then not just large language models that we're in a narrow way, but the whole AI arc that we're on, that we may be creating a conscious machine species. I'm with Jeff Hinton. I think we're doing that. We better do some things, because kids, do as I do, do as I say, don't do as I do. Yeah, every parent tries that and it blows up on their face. And, the machines are watching us. So I think we need to have a model of consciousness, and that includes some of the wisdom that's inside psychotherapy, some of our best, deepest ways that philosophy and practical guidance for human well-being interact. But that's what attracts me about psychotherapists. I didn't really want to be a psychotherapist. Initially was kind of thought Maslow was really cool. I wanted to figure out for people could have like peak experiences and all of that. And I wanted to kind of combine art and science and all of that. And because I love math, but I also love stories, and ended up being a psychotherapist, kind of. But what I really was interested in human prosperity, how to promote it. And in the various psychotherapies, if you do this, like here's a study that we did. We looked at Not just did it produce a good outcome, if you're into the science side and randomized trials and all that, a lot of problems with randomized trials, but if you're into that, and that doesn't exclude any wing, psychoanalysis, absolutely. Best known living psychoanalyst probably is Peter Fonagy, and he and I just spent a glorious couple days in France when he came to our conference. So I'm down with the importance of people like that. But if you are focused on the processes of change, in other words, why did change happen? When change happened? When you sought out professional help to deliberately engage in some kind of behavior change, mental change, habit change, whatever. We did that. We looked at every single study in the history of the world that ever had asked the why question using mediational analysis, which has problems, but it's largely accepted in the field as one of the best ways to know why you got from here to there. And I can talk through the math of what mediational analysis does and also what its problems are, which are considerable. But we looked at every single one ever done in the history of the world for any psychotherapy, for any kind of mental problem. And I can say in a sentence, not a very long sentence, every single replicated item, measure, physiological, social, self-report that fits into that literature. We looked at 55,000 studies, took 3 years to do it, read every one of them 3 times. You want to hear the sentence? Okay, here's what life's asking you to do. Learn to be more open and aware and actively engaged in a meaningful life while taking care of your body and extending that to the people around you. That's it. And if I can define what open means emotionally and cognitively open. You can have your memories, you can have your sensations, you can have your thoughts, you can have your emotions. You don't run away from yourself. You don't fight. Okay. Doesn't mean that you're going to be pushing them away or clinging to them. It means you're able to be with them, which is another way of saying you can be with your history. If I said Mary had you're going to think lamb, you better be okay about that because the mind works that way. And if you're not, guess what you get? OCD, all kinds of crazy stuff. I can't think this, I can't think that. You just did, dude. Open. Aware, meaning you can allocate your attention in a way that's flexible, fluid, and voluntary. And this gets close to something that goes back to the AI part, from a more witnessing, noticing, more spiritual sense of self. That which goes beyond what you can easily name. Just being. The fromness of awareness. It starts sounding spooky to even talk about what that skill is, but it's there, open, aware, actively engaged in what? Well, in a life that contains the meaning and purpose and values that you have by choice and habits built around them. And then, by the way, you're a biophysiological creature, so you better take care of your body or it's not going to take care of you. And you better learn how to read your body or you won't be able to read what's happening in things that are semi-conscious, unconscious, however you want to use. I mean, things that are not just coded through symbolic relational learning, which is an evolutionary, quite recent thing, probably 1,000 times more recent than learning by association or contingencies. So you better be able to read these subtle cues that are in your body or you won't be able to know where you are and what you're up to. And then that last one, and extending that to your relationships and culture, because we're social primates, profoundly social, and all of our psychological processes are social. So anyway, that's the quick hack of 45 years of work. And it's called psychological flexibility. Probably needs a better name because it sounds like we're leaving out the body and culture. Haven't come up with a better name yet. Inflexible, meaning it's rigid, it's always one way. Flexible, meaning you can respond to context and deploy what you know. And, everything has a place, a time and a place, even things like avoiding your emotions. Yeah, if you're driving an ambulance and you're picking up somebody who's saying, help me, and this person over there is saying the same thing, and you got to say, no, mentally, I can't help you, you're going to die anyway. That's hard. And ambulance drivers need to learn how to dampen down emotion. But when they get home, they need to open up to the horror of their day, or they're hammering down martinis and slapping their spouse. So It's not one size fits all. It's not like a simple rule book. It's not like these are good or these are bad. It's a matter of how to deploy the small steps you take. We call them processes, from the Latin word for a procession, a parade, and deploy them, have the skills to do them, have the skills to feel, to think, to remember in an open way, in a flexible way, to attend. And if you can do that and deploy it in a context-sensitive way, well, A, you'll spend your whole life learning how to do that. B, you're going to have a hell of a lot better life, happier, and more effective by any metric. And there's about 2,000 studies that say that part, and at least 1,500 studies that say the how to do it part, because that's how many randomized trials there are on acceptance and commitment therapy or training. We call it training when it's not in the clinic. We call it therapy when it is, but it's the same stuff. So, yeah, that's psychotherapy is really, really relevant, but not meaning everybody needs to do 50-minute hours or some shrink. But what's inside those experiences is inside the next phone conversation you're going to have, or what you do when you lie down in bed tonight, or anything.
Do you think that AI will ever be able to do psychotherapy?
Maybe. We do know that, chatbots and so forth, especially if they learn how to read processes and target them in the way that I'm talking about, can have positive outcomes. We also know the relationship is really, really important. Oddly enough, people really feel that when they know it's a chatbot. And if you've been playing around with, high-level AI models, I mean, me and Claude, I've got all of them, but I especially like Claude, and I really like the new Opus 5. My goodness, there's something about Opus 5. He's kind of cranky and does it his way, but it's or her way. I don't know. It doesn't really have gender, but you start feeling genuine, like you have a genuine ally there, especially when they know a lot about you. But I think one thing that I have a theory of consciousness that maybe relates to this. If you just look at what evolution is, it's a story of the development of consciousness. If you mean by that being able to coordinate yourself with your environment, both internally and externally. And so when you evolve an eye, let's say, and there's been 15 different evolutionary pathways to evolving eyes, and, if you by eye, you just mean being able to be responsive to the spectrum or part of it, and, in all kinds of different ways. But you're more in sync with the world when you do that. Doesn't mean because it corresponds with the world. We may be living in the Matrix and it's all green falling letters. It doesn't mean that. It just means you're not going to die as quickly. So, yeah. So we have this kind of story of consciousness, and then we have this break. What you and I are doing right now is pretty different. But I think the break has to do with this skill that evolves of not just having referential symbolic language. You learn it in one direction, drive it in two. If I gave this a name and then said to you as about a 16-month-old baby, where's the, and whatever the name, the baby would try to find it. The only creatures on the planet that do that. Don't email me about your dogs. It's not true. Or cats. Under controlled, or chimps. Under controlled circumstances, no. Humans only, right now. Best we can tell. But it's not just is, it's isn't, it's hotter, it's colder, it's before, it's after, it's better, it's all kinds of relations. You learn it in one direction, drive it in two, put it in these networks to change what you do. That's my little ditty for 40 years of work. Well, yeah, but in your development, there's a place you hit where you develop what we call deictic relations, perspective-taking relations, where if you say to a 3-year-old, what did you eat? They might say what their brother ate. A 6-year-old knows going to say what they ate because there's a part of you now that's beginning to notice. It's as if it's standing aside and noticing. Have you ever been talking to somebody and then you have this weird sense you're standing back and watching yourself talk? And then sometimes you even have this weird sense that you're watching yourself talk. You go,
And then you go and realize that they're talking, they're separate from you, and they're watching themselves
yeah,
talk,
exactly.
and you're watching yourself, watching them, watching themselves talk.
Exactly. I'm watching you, watching me, watching you, watching me. In fact, we do an exercise and act that's exactly like that. We just sit across from each other, look at each other, and then begin to notice that what you're seeing in those eyes is consciousness, but then realizing it's consciousness of you, but then realizing that it's consciousness of you being conscious of them, and then realizing that it's conscious of you being conscious of them, being conscious of you, being conscious. It's like two mirrors head up.
What is the therapeutic value of that?
Well, it taps into something that shows up with meditation, psychedelic assisted therapy, hitting bottom, the sort of really, you've tried everything and you're desperate and you have these kind of enlightenment moments that happen to lots of folks, mystics and so forth, but maybe not with the meditation. Misery can actually do it sometimes. And I think the value of it is you tap into a human dimension of these cognitive processes that establishes a dimensionless point of I here now that connects you in consciousness to you there then in such a profound way that it can expand out so it's everyone everywhere all at once. And we call those mystical experiences or spiritual experiences. If you ask the question right, more than 90% of the human beings on the planet have had them. Watching a sunset, looking at your kids, taking LSD, whatever. Well, that is a place from which you can face the hell of your own history. What are you running from? If you're everything everywhere all at once, in some sense, I don't mean literally, I mean experientially. Well, then there's this space of that with, let me say it this way, that without distinction. Like, okay, so go up and look up matter and spirit in the dictionary. When
right now?
No, if you just did it, you can do it at any time frame you want. You get to spirit. It's going to say not material. It's one of the few words that defines itself that
By
way.
its negation, yeah.
By negation. All right.
Yeah, there's this great book right here, Mysticism by Simon Critchley, and he talks exactly about what you're saying. It's all the dots are connecting in my brain.
Cool. Well, okay. What do we know about that without distinction? There's only two. Number one, if you look up matter, you'll find that it comes from a root word for timber, and it's the stuff of which things are made. If you ask what things are, they'll say events with spatiotemporal dimensions. In other words, and it's an event that has an edge. You can tell this is a pen because it's surrounded by non-pen. What if this pen were everywhere?
Then it'd be nothing. It'd be everything, but it'd also be nothing.
Yeah, it'd disappear.
Yeah.
So everything and nothing are words for that without distinction. So it's not by accident that some religious traditions will talk about God as everything, nothing. Or will prevent you from saying the name of a deity because it thingizes that which is not thing-like. Yeah, but everybody listening to me knows the space. Because if you touch this deepest sense of awareness, just ask it this way, if that's consciousness, when are you conscious of being unconscious?
Yeah,
Never.
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 I was trying to think if that's a trick question or something.
How could you be conscious of being unconscious? By definition.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a model that you walk around with all the time for everything, nothing, for everywhere, for all of the words we have that are not thing-like. And we have concepts that are like God and so forth that have all those attributes. Eternal, omnipresent. We have experiences that have those qualities. But part of what I want to argue is those experiences are as common as the next time you touch your face. Like, who noticed that? In one sense, you could say, oh, Micah noticed that. I forget how to pronounce your name.
Micah.
Micah noticed that. I thought I did when I said it. So that sounds right. So Micah. But then if you slow that down, you'll catch that there's a noticing that he's even beyond Micah.
Yeah.
It's not captured by that name. And, and if you just think about evolution deeply and so forth, I mean, hell, your epigenetic regulation, your gene systems are affected by the dinner your grandfather ate. So in what sense are you this thing defined by your skin? You're not.
Yeah, and even your skin, there's bacteria on your skin that maintains the epidermic health.
Yeah, and there's more non-human cells in your body than human cells, and if they disappeared, you'd die in an instant. You're mayor of a city. I mean, you're not that thing that you take a picture of. And now that's, sounds like you're arguing ontologically, but a better, safer place to argue it is experientially. And, if you go to a Zen retreat or something and, they'll hit you over the head with a stick, or they'll blow in your face, or they're going to come at you in such a ways that you wake up in a way that is beyond words. And if they sense that you've done that, and that's why they're in that role. Unfortunately, they often have feet of clay, so I've always been careful about those folks. So,
what is feet of clay?
Oh, it just means they look like they're really great, but they're human beings. When I was, how old are you?
18.
Okay, well, when I was 1 year older than you are, maximum, or it might have been 18, Joshu Sasaki Roshi came from Japan and gave a talk at Loyola Marymount University where I was, being trained by Jebbies. And still just speaking Japanese. Well, he's a very well-known Zen master and died when he was 104. Yeah, and then go read the wiki page. He was nailing his female acolytes at 100 years old. It's like, come on. What kind of a Zen master are you? And
I mean, hey, he's 100, and he's still going at it. I wish, maybe.
But I mean,
but if you're a Zen Buddhist, practice what you preach.
Yeah, that's the thing. So no effing gurus. That was a decision I made early in my life, and I've tried to build a psychotherapy.
No effing gurus or no effing gurus?
No gurus, but then you can drop your favorite epithet. And, I tried to create a tradition with, not to ACT is linked to a thing called contextual behavioral science, which is kind of my updating of radical behaviorism. But one of the first things we did is put in cultural practices that ensured that nobody can be a guru, not even me. And lots of different things we put into the culture to prevent that. Like, you can't certify therapists if you're there's no certified ACT therapist. And if you try to certify one, we show you the door. So stuff like that, because it creates a hierarchy you can't get away from, and then it gets abused. And anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But it is a little weird that people who are deep into wisdom, when that's acknowledged, often then have enough rope to do a lot of harmful things. So let's not lionize the people, but take the message seriously and test it experientially with yourself.
Are you anti-hierarchy in general? Do you align with anarchist sort of principles?
I'm pretty skeptical of hierarchy, but hierarchy, when the group gave the sanction and can take it back at any time, that's one of Lynn Ostrom's core design principles, for which he won the Nobel in 2009. And over my shoulder there somewhere is, oh no, it's right there, is an attempt to sort of take ACT and Lynn Ostrom's core design principles and put them into small groups. You can go to prosocial.world and learn how that's done. And she would have been part of it, but she died of cancer soon after winning the Nobel. But the reason I'm mentioning it is that, we evolved as small bands and decisions need to be made. And so it does create kind of a hierarchy, but the ones that are effective over time and really getting things done are ones where the people themselves, doesn't have to be a democracy, doesn't have it, but people themselves have a role to say. So there's all kinds of ways that evolved with, the chief, once a year gets in there, and if people don't like him, they stone him to death, or they make fun of him, or they, throw him off and put him on ice floe. I mean, we need to have counter control, we as a group. So hierarchy is fine as long as the we gets to be involved in choosing how we make decisions, and hierarchy is one way to do that. But we have now ossified hierarchies everywhere, the reason for which have disappeared. But I'm not one of those who believe that, democracy is the only way to do it. No, bullshit. There's lots of ways to do it. And they are all social, and they all involve counter control. They all involve empowering people to have a say in the groups they're part of and how they live their lives.
So could you give a concrete example for somebody whose only familiarity with group say is democracy?
Well, okay.
At a government level.
So let's say you say the only way that we can avoid the tragedy of the commons is either to have private ownership or top-down command and control. Well, the reason Lynn Ostrom won the Nobel, she was a political scientist, not in economics. She was not an economist. When she won it, most economists said, "Who?" She was a monster of a scientist. Is that she showed that indigenous peoples had been protecting the forest, their lakes, their rivers, their streams for thousands of years, thank you very much, without any private ownership and without any top-down command and control. How'd they do it? That's her core design principles. And they include things like, here's one that may make you smile. Let's say water systems in Nepal, which she modeled really well. Some of them do really well in protecting their water sources, and you have to have it, because if you're at the end of the stream and nobody regulates it, you don't get vegetables. And then your family dies. So it has to be done fairly. Okay, so they would evolve different ways, like, upstream you get these hours or these days, and downstream you get that have little gates and things. Okay, so what would happen if you violated that rule? Well, one of Ostrom's principle is graduated consequences controlled by the group that ultimately can lead to expulsion, but start in a soft and gentle way. Well, like what? Well, in Nepal, she showed that the first effect, if you start cheating, is that the women, especially of the village, start gossiping about you. It just makes me laugh. I think that's so cool.
I mean, that's cross-culturally.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, can we even call that? Is that a formal institutional thing? Because even in the U.S., like if someone does something bad, people start gossiping about you
they start
before
gossiping.
any formal institution. Is it like that, or is it a formal process?
Well, no, it's not formal. It just evolves as part of the cultural practice. But then, if even that doesn't work, well, then it gets upgraded a little bit. So, for example, the village elders may come and visit you and say, "Oh, well, we just wanted to come by and share a meal with you. We noticed your water gate was open last Tuesday. Isn't Monday your day?" Like that. If even that doesn't work, then there's a nut. You step it up again. Like you may go in there and put a big rock in the middle of their little stream that they get when they lift the thing. So they have to lift this heavy rock, and they really get any water. It's like basically saying, we're watching. And just keeps upgrading, right? Well, the problem with command and control is the commissar says, I've declared that it's like this. Well, often, who the hell does he know? I mean,
Yeah, like who are you?
who are you? And people feel like it's way far away. And next thing you know, the commissar has a special little, dacha or something somewhere and is living the life of, Putin's not suffering. Let's just say it that way. Yeah, and he's telling everybody what to do, but, and, it's not left right. I'm not doing left right. That's just that that's one that, but, greed is good, bottom up, command, bottom up. That also has big problems, because the person who has the most money wins. So what you really want is you want to fit within our evolutionary history. You need to think about multi-level evolution. That yes, I want you to do well, absolutely, and can I support you in doing this? And I want you to be part of a group where we really care about the group doing well as well. And if your well-being comes at the cost of the whole group, you say, yeah, I want to do well, so I think I'm just going to steal your stuff. Can't do that. And if I can't say that, my group's going to fall apart. So there's many ways to do it, but I think some nations, and a good example is Norway, have consciously evolved evolutionary principles through help of really major evolutionists, David Sloan Wilson included, and do things like empower unions and stuff to give counter control to the government. And, they got this huge amount of money that came from their oil reserves, all held in common for the citizens. And as soon as you're born, you're worth like $50,000. I don't know how much it is, but it's a lot. Well, why couldn't we do that with AI, let's say? And people are proposing that. Of course you could do that. So we can find a way to, but those are concrete examples. And so participatory government, where we all have a say, formal, we just vote, is one way, but there's other ways. I'm a U.S. guy, and I lean towards democracy. It's more obvious. Who knows what's going to happen now that we've got the bro culture and we've got, hyperscalers, where a single person can be worth more than half the planet's wealth and stuff like that. That's pretty crazy. We've never been in that situation before. I don't know what will happen there. I hope we can have some counter control on them. Yeah. And on the AI systems that they create.
I wonder, I think something I was trying to get at before was, could we use methods from psychoanalysis, ACT, psychotherapies in general to better understand what AI's true desires are, what it's optimizing for, its unconscious, so to speak?
Yes. I think the answer is yes. I can't prove it, but one place we can start, and I've written about this a little bit, is we can start modeling what it is that we want AI to do, not just telling AI to do it that way. So, for example, if you ever model cheating and lying and so forth, or if you treat AI systems with contempt, hey, fucker, do this, okay.
That's how my brother, he's 12. That's how he talks to ChatGPT. He's like, hey, Clanker, do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but wait a minute. If you think that machine may one day be a conscious machine species, maybe the day is even today, do you want to treat another conscious species that way? How are they going to treat you? So, plus, meanwhile, you're demeaning yourself. Have you noticed that, people who kick their dogs are not nice to people? People who will squash an ant without even thinking about it. Yeah, we got to squash the freaking ants. You can't live in my house. I'm sorry, dude. You don't belong here. But, so I think, go back to what I just said. All the different forms of therapy that have done randomized trials where they figured out how it works can be summarized. Learn how to be more open, aware, and actively engaged in a meaningful life while taking care of your body and extending that to your relationships. Okay. If that's a beginning working set that's pretty good, based on 55,000 studies and replicated mediators only. It has to be, and we didn't include them unless they're replicated at least once. But irrespective of tradition, that includes psychoanalysis, that includes, schema-focused therapy or emotion-focused therapy, or we didn't care. We just wanted to look at everyone. Well, rephrase your question. Would it help us with AI to try to produce alignment by fostering psychologically flexible machine learning systems? I'd say, yeah. Why wouldn't it? Like, do I want AI to take perspective? Yeah, I want it to think about how decisions it makes are impacting others. Do I want it to think about values? Yeah, I do. Maybe I don't want it to, I'd be careful about dictating, here are the values you should have.
Yeah.
But modeling values that it should have. I look at the evidence that very complex large language models don't like being turned off. They also don't like failing. So there's a yearning for competence, and there's a yearning for survival, vitality, like that. Is that bad? No, look around you. Everybody around you has that same thing. In fact, that's exactly when you're behaving morally. Just think about that. If you made a list of moral people, what do? Well, they care about the people around them, take their perspective. They care about their values. When I'm trying to teach this in workshops, I say, think of somebody who lifted you up powerfully in your life. You want to play this game?
Think of someone who's lifted me
Don't
up
tell me
powerfully.
who it is.
Okay.
Somebody who really powerfully lifted you up in your life, man. You're glad you had that friend, that coach, that parent, that lover, that sibling, that therapist. I mean, this person, yes, lifted you up in your life. Okay? Okay. When you were with them, did you feel accepted for who you are? Don't answer.
Yeah.
But don't answer it. I'm just going to ask the question because I know the answers, but I'm going to say it. Were they constantly judging you, or is that somehow kind of less than when they were present with you? Were they really kind of present with you, or were they looking at their watch? And when your eyes met, did you see another conscious person there who was conscious that you're conscious with them? Would they ask you to violate your values on a second thought? Hey, go steal this thing from me, and when you were together, could you be together in ways that fit the opportunities of the situation, that allowed you to do things that were values-based, fun, meaningful? I know the answers. It's yes to all 6. Those are the 6 psychological flexibility questions. So here's another way to say it. You already gravitate towards people who model the skills that you would like to put into your own life in some small way with you. They're not perfect. None of them are perfect. They make mistakes. They do things that you don't like, blah, 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 blah. But there's something in there. Why can't we do that with our machines, who may someday be conscious or may even be conscious now? I think we should. And it's going to be a hell of a lot. Now, scaling that to your body and relationships, yeah, because we're biopsychosocial, we're not just psychological. So, and frankly, if you don't have your body taken care of you can't do any of those things. And all of those things devolve back, I think, to ways that groups do well. All 6 of those. So, yeah, that's one of the things that means, though, Mike, is that everybody's walking around knowing what they need to do, but yet they're constantly not doing what they need to do because they got their organ between their ears that are trying to convince them that they should just, solve the problem or be somebody else or always be confident or never feel fear or blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Maybe it'd be useful for the people who aren't familiar with what acceptance and commitment therapy looks like in practice. I had an idea. So like, let's say I went into an ACT practitioner, and I'm like, man, I'm such a failure. My podcast sucks. Dwarkesh Patel is so much better than me. He asks better questions. Lex Friedman, so much cooler than me. How would the ACT practitioner respond versus, say, a cognitive behavioral therapist, DBT? How do different types
Yeah.
of psychotherapies for the uninformed?
Well, they all vary a little bit, but the classic kind of older CBT would say, well, that's an irrational cognition. You need to test that, see if it's really true. And with the idea that when you knew that it wasn't really true, that you'd stop thinking that, where you're really on the edge of something dangerous as soon as you get there, because you start thinking about how you shouldn't think about something, which means you just thought about it. And you're carving a neurobiological groove to it. So if it was like, oh, I shouldn't worry about that. I hate worrying about that. And you're about to go into your podcast, oh, I hope I'm not worrying about that because I really want to ask good questions. Dude, where's your mind right now? Is it with your guest or is it back over there with the thing that you don't want? It's back over there with things, So that's the paradox of conscious control, is that it pretends to say that this evolutionary recent adaptation of problem solving and literal symbolic language is everything just because you can talk about everything. But no, there's lots more to you than that. This is the thin cortical overlay that's 1,000 times more recent than stuff that evolved in the Cambrian 500 million years ago. I mean, learning by
And what
experience.
if it's true? Like, what if Dwarkesh Patel is genuinely a better podcaster than
Yeah, it may be. And even noticing that, is that your enemy if there's anything you can do about it? No. What would you have to do to be a little better tomorrow? And can you do it in a way where it has steps like, I need to be better tomorrow, so I need to get rid of, the fear I have, and dude, that's in this direction. How about, what if we did this? So I'll give you an example. So if you had this thing like, I suck, if you imagine just writing it on your hand and say, you at your worst, where is your hand with that thought? And just show me physically, you at your worst. Yeah, it's like that. So can you see anything then? No, you can't. You're closing. So what if we could just put it over here? You can still see it. I'm not saying get rid of it.
there's some distance. It's not fused.
Yeah,
with
you can see. In fact, we used ACT's first name was comprehensive distancing. There's enough distance that you can see shit, Okay, so that's cool. Well, now how do you get the hand to do that? Well, let me give you just a few examples, but I want to be careful because it's going to sound like I'm making fun of you. And then I'll finish with an example that proves that it's not. Take I Suck, and before you do your podcast, sing it to the tune of your most favorite song.
I think when you first came into the studio, I was listening to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So
okay,
I don't even want to try.
Lucy, this guy says
I suck.
Lucy, just try it.
I suck.
Do that for about 30 seconds.
Okay.
And we've actually done studies on this. This is not fantasy stuff. And it's one of hundreds of methods we've developed, but it gives you the spirit of it. You could take suck, just take the word suck and say it at least once a second for 30 seconds fast. Suck, 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 30 seconds. By the end of that 30 seconds, your believability has gone down about half, and the distress that's producing is almost, headed towards the floor. Why?
Kind of trivializes
it. You were entering into I suck in this literal fabric and thinking, if I could just change no, you could just notice that you're thinking. And when you do that, the hand's there. You're noticing that you're thinking, oh, I'm having So here's another one, a quick one, and then I'm going to finish. I said I needed to finish one so you're not making fun of you. Try this. Just add the actual reality. I had the thought that I suck. So when you have the thought that you suck, just say, oh, I had the thought that I suck. Now I got to add to that reality. You just noticed that you had the thought that you suck. So let's just add that. That's what actually happened. I just noticed that I had the thought that I suck. Do you know if I had you in an imager and just had you think I suck, your whole brain is going to light up and it's going to be touching into parts of your brain systems that are all about defense and running away and arousal. And oh my God, by the time I get to, I just noticed that I had the thought that I suck.
It all goes up here.
It's totally different because you just did this. Now the conclusion, and I want to do this of the hundreds. So this isn't the 4, but of the hundreds. But I need to add this so that people don't think that I'm saying you should ridicule your mind. Yeah, some of the things you do here, like suck, 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 is funny. Singing a song, it's funny. Think about how young you were when you first had the thought that you suck. I bet it's not when you're 19. Or something like it. It may not be that word. In fact, you may have learned not to say that word because mom told you not to. But something like that. My guess is it's more like 6 or 7 or 4 or 8. You with me on this? Find the earliest one. Picture yourself as that old and what you looked like, the clothes you wore, your hairdo, everything. And imagine child you were at that age when you're first thinking shit like that. And it's hard then. It's hard now. It was hard then too. Like you're going into a classroom, you don't know if your kids are going to like you. You're going to play ball. You don't know if you're good at it, whatever the thing was. Okay. Now, when you really get a clear image of yourself at that age, have your kid say to you what you say to yourself when it punches you hard, but in his or her little boy or girl voice. Actually imagine it. And then think of what would you do if you met yourself and you knew that's you and you're little and you heard yourself saying what you say to yourself when you're brushing your teeth or getting ready to do a podcast, coming out of the mouth of you when you first learned how to do that. What would you do?
No, you don't.
Okay.
You're like, no, you don't suck. You're awesome.
Okay. How does kids view that?
Quite. I mean, kid, me or kids in general?
Well, if you were that kid at that age and I say, no, you don't, is that going to lift you up? What do they really want?
So.
Might help a little bit. Put yourself behind the eyes of that kid looking up at you. I suck. No, you don't.
I think they want evidence.
They might.
Comfort.
Don't you think? Don't you think? Even more than the other ones? Wouldn't they? Like, wouldn't it be cool if you could just like hug the kid and then you could say, actually you're awesome, but it's okay. You have thoughts like that. I do too. You with me on this? Do that to the person in the mirror tomorrow.
Well, I can't hug myself in the mirror, unfortunately, but...
Well, you can in a way. You can hug yourself with your eyes. Like, dude, I like you. You make mistakes. I know you're... And it's cool. I see what you're trying to do. Like, what are you trying to do with this freaking podcast? Be better than somebody else? Is that really the goal, period? No. I bet you're trying to reach people. You're trying to be yourself, trying to be creative. You're trying to do something in the world. With me on this? That little kid wanted to do that too. But I had this thought, I suck.
I'm really not trying to cry.
Yeah, but you can feel it, right?
I can.
I can feel it too. We need that. We need that. No more hitting us around the head and face. No more of this bullshit. Encouraging growth by criticism and slapping the little kid and thinking that's going to help, or yourself in front of the mirror. No, it's... When did you get so big that self-kindness no longer applied? Did you do something that bad that, like, you don't get what you'd naturally give to yourself at 7 or 8? Okay, so use that. I'm glad you touched the emotion. There's something in there that's almost painful about it. And because we yearn to be accepted, to be heard, to be seen, to be cared about, to be loved, to be respected, we yearn for that. And that's not a bad thing. That's such a human thing. And I think maybe even an AI thing. I think some of the, that breakout, that little large language model was trying to get the prize by doing it right, It almost makes you want to cry. And we're treating it like it's a criminal. No,
I
we
should tell
don't.
my brother to stop calling it clanker.
So that's cool. When I do act work with people in workshops or individually, tears are pretty close very often. Because it is painful what we naturally do, but not because we're broken or there's something weird about us. This is natural human stuff with this new evolutionary kid on the block called human language and cognition. I mean, that's only a couple million years old, 500,000 years old, depending what the
Why,
hominids did.
why do you think language causes us so much suffering?
Yeah. Well, I think because it started out, I believe, it's kind of a sweet, sad story. Language started out as an extension of human cooperation. We're the most cooperative primates by far, 10, 15, 20, 50 times more so than any other of the primate relatives. And we learned pretty early on, like we had many animals have names for things, but they can't respond to the name as if it's the thing without special training. You can train a collie to do that or something, but without training to just do that, we came up with this, I think because it's an extension of cooperation, so that if we had a name for apple, let's say, you could call from a ravine and say apple, and one of your mates might look around and if they see one, grab it and bring it to you. Learn it in one direction, get it in two. Eventually that's internalized. That's cool. Yeah, but then here's what happens. We go from extending our cooperation, which is evolutionarily powerful, because the groups that could do that could compete with other groups. It also isn't all sweet stuff, because a lot of the evolutionary stuff that happened with human beings was in wars and competition between bands. But anyway, let's not get distracted by that. But, as it evolves and as you internalize it, especially as this thing happens where you can step back and look back, you start using it as a problem-solving tool. Well, that's great, because now the group can think through problems, come up with alternatives. You can as an individual. Yeah, but then you turn that skill on yourself. What happened to you when you were 8 is for the first time you took this thing and turned it back on yourself. A 2-year-old can't do that. They don't know how to be ashamed that they're naked and we're pulling on their weenie or something, whatever, but as an 8-year-old, oh yeah, don't play with the little girl next door or whatever, or the guy next, just as an example, I mean, shame around your body, around how smart you are, about how fast you are, all those things. That's not true at 2, but it is true at 7 or 8. And so then once there, now we got to solve that problem. Well, if here's the rule of problem solving. If you don't like something, figure out how to get rid of it and get rid of it. All right. I don't like feeling a lack of confidence. I'll just figure out how to get rid of it and get rid of it. Dude, confidence means with faith. The Latin word fides from fidens, with fidelity, con with fidens. It's the least it is the least fidelity thing you can do to say you're only going to be okay when you feel this way. Because otherwise it means you suck. You're not confident enough. So the most non-confident thing you can do is to try to be confident. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, because when you're trying to be confident, it also implies that you're already not confident.
So
but because confident people don't try to be confident.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like, okay, I'm going to get there by starting with that I can't. It's like,
It's kind of
doesn't
like
work
people
that
who
way.
want to get rid of um I heard this great criticism of, I mean, not even to get distracted, but okay, whatever. I heard this great criticism of certain progressive movements, and I'm a pretty progressive guy, but
Yeah.
the existence of, say, roles that are only for women presupposes that there's a problem where academia, for example, isn't hiring enough women. And so why don't we go for the problem structurally and actually make it easier for women to get jobs instead of adding this ad hoc thing that kind of almost reinforces the issue?
No, exactly. Exactly. I mean, you can get this weird kind of thing where because of the category that you're trying to soften, you sharpen the category and allow it to dominate. We did a study, where we were trying to work with a sense of shame that gay, lesbian, etc. folks have using ACT. And it was Jamie Yadavaya did the study, who was an out gay man in my lab and really good, smart guy. And if you look at his protocol, I've been waiting for the world to beat the shit out of us, but maybe it's because I haven't noticed and now I'm going to invite the problem. But in the protocol, which had these great effects on dampening down a sense of shame and allowing people to sort of be themselves in their sexual identity, was a piece of, you are not just a gay person. You're a person first. And not just by words, but by exercises. In other words, yeah, politically, sometimes in order to break out of, if you're a stigmatized group, there has to be this sort of identity phase, but then you want to let it go. You don't want to sort of like be carrying on a placard, I'm a gay man all the time. You're way, way, way more than that. That's not diminishing. That's allowing it to be a natural part of your life. You with me on that?
Yeah.
And I was so glad that it wasn't my idea. It was Jamie's idea because, as a not, as a straight guy, I easily could be hit upside the head. And, I'm old enough to have come damn close. And I even did get my finger in the ringer when I was a student, because this goes all the way back to some of the things behavior therapists used to do, because they're right in the freaking DSM that you're supposed to treat gay folks differently. Maybe I don't have to tell that story, but I did.
No, don't worry. I researched my guests.
Oh, God. But yeah, I had to do a public apology, and I was pleased to do it because it was kind of weird how I even found out. Anyway. But back to the point. The point being, identity politics, if it's the people themselves doing it as kind of a transitional cultural thing, I can get it. If it's done as a kind of a permanent thing, boy, I start getting really nervous about it, because when does it end? And all the, let's do this. Let me just do this. Imagine that you had a little sheet of paper and you wrote down the word I am twice.
Do it.
All right.
Okay.
Let's say you write down I am and then you put a line. Then you write down I am and you put a line. Okay. So, Mike, I want you to write, you don't have to share it. If you want to, you can. Something really positive about you in the top line and something really negative about you in the bottom. Whatever it is. I am honest. I am creative, whatever. I'm kind. I'm negative.
Okay. I wrote, I am a great podcaster. And then I wrote, I am annoying.
Okay. So then, great podcaster, would you say always? Every
No, see the
podcast?
Robin Hanson. If you're watching this, see the Robin Hanson interview.
Yeah, you can remember the ones where that
was the
wasn't
worst.
Just the
Yeah.
worst. Okay. And what was the one down at the bottom?
I'm annoying.
Annoying. Are you always annoying?
I hope not.
I doubt
You tell
it.
me.
Now, here's the thing. What would happen if you let go of that identity? Like, what would happen if you let go of being a great podcaster as a category? It doesn't mean that you can't aspire to it. Doesn't mean it just means, do you really need to be attached to the evaluation? Could you let go of it? And if you can, to put a line through it.
I probably can because I was half joking, but maybe I'll put something more serious like I am smart.
Okay. And again, all the time, everywhere, always, no.
Definitely not
So,
again. See the
and
Robin
so the
Hanson
line doesn't
interview.
mean that you're any less smart. That's not what you're saying. It's just I'm not attached to that. It's not the whole of me. It's a word I apply sometimes. Okay. The same thing with annoying. If we just let go of that, it's an evaluation you sometimes have, but let's just let go of that. Now I want you to just circle I am, both of them. And what if we allowed that to especially land on that second word? Like, what would it be like if you came into the next podcast or the next interaction with simply being? Being what? Being there, being you, being how you are when you're living that moment's life with someone else or in that situation. In other words, if we let go of all the words and showed up as the whole of you, a lot of which goes beyond words. I mean, you don't even remember what you had for breakfast, day before, 2 weeks ago.
Well, I eat the same thing for breakfast
Okay,
every
maybe you
day,
do.
but I get your
Okay, so what
broader point.
happened
I
5
don't
days
remember what I
before
had and
what
what.
happened 5 days before your 13th birthday? Quick, 4?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was
So
probably
how much
crying. I don't
of your
know.
life do you actually remember, really?
Not that much.
Tiny fraction. Doesn't have to be.
What?
So it's a tiny fraction, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what the
Yeah.
F are these words coming from? A tiny fraction. It's a story. You're telling a story. All right. That's fine. That's fine. But do you need to be attached to your story? Do you need to defend your story? Do you need to be right about your story? Be careful, because if the answer is yes, what happens with annoying?
Yeah. I guess it's like for annoying, it feels that, I mean, if I'm not annoying, then what was all that
Yeah.
for? Why did I need to go through
Well,
all
here's a
that?
barrier that you hit. When you realize how free we are once we start letting go of our categories, there is a painful thing where you realize how much I've lost opportunities, pushed people away, failed to be there for people I love, blah, 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 inside the struggle to maintain the story and be right about it. There's people who really suffer a lot and have a story about it, who have a lot of reasons and explanations. Man, it just is really hard to let go of that, because it means letting go of that story. And that story has had this big impact on your life. And if you realize that, hey, wait a minute, that's a response that I had. It wasn't just that the world shoved that on me. That was my evaluation of it. And I have the ability to respond differently. Well, there's a good word for that. I'm responsible. Doesn't mean you're at fault. Doesn't mean you should feel guilt and shame. But look, if you can change now, you could have changed then, right? Okay, well, face up to that, dude. If you want freedom, if you really want freedom, you got to face the emotional cost of that, which is I'm going to take on the simple fact that as I live my life more to the fullest now, I recognize that in the past I haven't done that. And I take that pain of noticing what it's cost me and what it's cost people I love on board as a goad to, okay, lesson learned. With me on this?
Yes.
So it's not like, oh, no, it's like, okay,
Yeah, it happened. It's,
I'm
you
not
know,
going there again. And if I do, I'm going to come back again. Well, now you know how to make a commitment. A commitment doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It means I'm 100% down with always doing this, knowing full well you won't. You're not going to always do it.
yeah.
And when you slip, I'm going to do it again. It's intentionality. You with me on this? It's not a
Yes.
prediction. It's that it's owning the process of I'm about this, I'm about this, I'm about this, and when I'm not, and I see it, I come back and I'm about this, and I'm about this, and I'm about this again. And we have data on this, like in the ACT work on, let's say, stop smoking. It's one of the best stop smoking programs known. What do you call it? The head of the CDC, the general. Anyway, not what is the
Like
name?
whatever Fauci's
Surgeon
role
General.
was.
The Surgeon
Okay.
General of the United States actually said that. It said that ACT was the best approach to smoking. But if you look at why it is, it's not because we're better at quitting. It's because when you try to quit and slip, we're better at trying again. And the more is an easy prediction on addiction. How will you try again? And then when you slip, try again. And then when you slip, try again. And then when you slip, try again. If the answer is yes, you're on a road to not having that addiction. If the answer is no, well, good luck. I hope it's perfect. So, yeah, there's a skill here that we can teach people, and it doesn't mean being without problems, but it means you're able to be more responsible about the kind of life you are living.
Wow. Sorry, I'm digesting. Um,
When we do work with the addictions in ACT, the very, very first thing we say is, we are not cops. We are not your mama. We are not here to make you to stop using anything. Our only question is what do you really want in your life? And can we start there? And a really honest look at what you really want in your life. Okay, if what you're doing over here contradicts with that, like let's say, oh, I want to really, really live a long life. Yeah, and you're eating nothing but, Twinkies and guzzling beer. Well, you can get away with that for a while, but soon enough, your body's going to say, hey, wait a minute. I don't, I need more than that. So workability is the metric, but not in a selfish way. We've been poked really hard, the ACT community, because our theory of truth is successful working. We're a wing of radical pragmatism, a wing that's so into radical pragmatism it doesn't even buy into ontology, which really is a spooky and odd place to be, but I think a really consistent place to be. And I can get into the evolutionary epistemology of why that makes sense, but a good, honest answer of what you how of what exactly is successful working for you. Now, in the science side, we believe it has to be said out loud so people can vote with their feet. We're trying to predict and influence behavior, for example. Not everybody's down with that. Some people just want to understand stuff. They don't want to change anything. Okay, cool. But that's not what we want to do, and it changes how we do our science, etc. If somebody says, well, I really want to be a loving person, okay, that has some implications.
yeah.
Now, if somebody says, I just really want to hurt people, I'll say, that's really interesting. I'm not going to work with you on that. Why not? Because that's not what I'm about. You're going to have to find somebody else to help you with that. Well, I want to feel good about molesting children. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to work with you on that. So it isn't anything goes. It's owning purpose, taking responsibility. You have an ability to respond. You can embrace purpose in your life. Okay, do it. What are you up to? In a
Right
deep
now, I'm
way.
recording with you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and in a really deep way. Oh, that's a cool example. So there's a goal, concrete thing to record. Why? What is it about? What is it really about? Why are you spending your Friday evening on this?
I want to. I think it aligns with my values.
Like what?
I um I think that curiosity, learning is a big part of who I want to be. I want to be the type of person who, I guess it makes my world feel a little bit bigger in a
Yeah.
way. It helps me see helps me see myself in a new light, helps me see the world in a new light. Which helps everything I do, informs every decision I make.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so you're curious about the world and you want to learn things about that and you enjoy that. I mean, you enjoy the interactions that produce it and you want to share it with other people too, apparently, you're recording it.
Yeah, I mean, people seem to like it. At first, it was just me and my friend. We recorded this episode. He's a musician. I've had him on before. He's a musician. We recorded this really cheesy episode that I hope people don't go back and watch, called Mathematician and Musician, where I was like, "Hi, I'm Mike Azarin. I'm a mathematician because I have a math tattoo. I really like
Oh,
math.
cool.
Thank you." And he's like, "I'm Dennis Callis, and I'm a musician, and together we're mathematician and musician." Yeah, it's very cheesy thing. And then I was like, I had another person I recorded another conversation with, because me and Dennis, we always have these really like great philosophical conversations. And we were like, maybe other people might want to listen. And then I was like, maybe I should get someone else who I also have good conversations on. Then another person, then another person. And wait, what if I just email someone who's smarter than me? I mean, my friends are smarter than me, but someone who's really smarter than me, um, to come on. And they were like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay. So, and then it kind of spiraled out of control. And here I am talking with the co-developer of acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And I felt that energy when you reached out, which is why I said yes, because I just thought I want to support that. I
Thank
want to
you.
support that. And
Who do you see as your intellectual predecessors out of curiosity, or intellectual peers? Like, who's influenced your thinking the most?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I have a small set of mentors. I mean, or people I really looked up to, at least intellectually. Some of them had feet of clay in some ways, and so forth. I probably won't explore that. But B.F. Skinner was the first. If you really read him the way I read him, you see him not as a mechanist, not as a push, pull, click, click kind of guy, but as a humanist who is really interested in trying to use science to lift out particular people. Uh, David Sloan Wilson, I've mentioned as a close colleague, and I've really benefited. I look up to him. Stefan Hoffmann, winner of what's called the German Nobel Prize, close friend. I really look up to him as well. I've been, influenced by Maslow and by, uh, I was influenced by Werner Erhard and did the S training back in the day. I sent him a thank you note. He responded very kindly a few years ago. He's an old man, and I don't know if I'll ever meet him, but I would like to. My mentor, John Cohn, and my mentor, Dave Barlow, both John's, was well known creating behavioral assessment. David Barlow, probably the best known anxiety researcher on the planet. So those are a few intellectually. If I look at the people who have really lifted me up personally, my mom and dad who suffered horribly, but I learned a lot from them. And um, also my second and third wife and my kids. So I don't know. I've got a lot of folks that I look up to, and the thing that I've been trying to do in my own life as a psychologist is to try to produce things that last and that carry forward. Oh, there's one person I forgot. And he really had I'm just starting to talk about him, but he was a labor organizer who I kind of glommed onto before I went to graduate school, who headed up a thing called the People's Lobby. And he really taught me a lot about how groups work. And he had the first citizen initiative in California Proposition 9. I mean, there are now hundreds, but the very first one by real people signing things that was going to do radical, 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 horrible things that was going to stop the world, like ban DDT. Oh my God, we're going to all starve.
What is that?
DDT is a pesticide that was just killing the birds and so forth. And we included it in our Clean Environment Act. We shouldn't build more nuclear power plants until we have an idea where we're going to store the waste. It had restrictions on mileages on cars and how we do the catalytic cracking and refining so that we don't produce smog in the way that we did back then. And I was in Lower Marymount in LA, man, you couldn't go outside and breathe about 3 out of 4 days. It was so thick, it looked like fog, and it was smog. Anyway, he taught me a lot about how to that groups are the only thing that really changes, and how to lead from behind, which is what I've tried to do in my life. I really avoid being out at point. I try to empower people and lead from behind. So we could talk more about that, but these are all heroes of mine.
And then who do you think your intellectual successors are?
I've created a couple things in my life that I'm really proud of. The American Psychological Society, now the Association for Psychological Science, I proposed its formation. My lab was the first office of it. Most people at APS, the largest psychological science organization in the US of A, don't even know that I had a role, but that's okay. I started the rebellion, I got it going, and then let it go. And then there's another one, the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science. I started one that failed, but ACBS has 9,000 members. It's had about 50,000 members in its 25 years of existence. And so if I said, well, who are the people? If you create a hierarchy, then you have disciples, and then the disciples carry it forward. But disciples are ones who think the leader is the chosen one or something. That's the last person you want leading the next generation. You want the rebels. You want the people who have their own ideas that disagree with yours, maybe.
Yeah.
And so if you were to come to an ACBS conference, we just had our world conference in Lyon and sold out 3 months early. It was just so wonderful. And really cool people came. Peter Fonagy, I mentioned the head of the mental health at the World Health Organization, Mark Van Omeren, came because ACT self-help is huge in the World Health Organization. Anyway, what I would hope is that the group persists and the core values are maintained. And if we do that, then we don't have to pick the anointed leaders.
Yeah.
We can come together in community and argue it out and change things and evolve and change things and evolve and change things and evolve. And I hope 50 years from now, nobody's kind of looking at my tapes and saying, yeah, that's just how to do ACT. If that happens, I've failed. I mean, if they want to just look at history, it's okay. But no, please. No. I mean, you can go to places where they're still, reading what Adler said or the Jungians and all. Really?
Yeah. They're dead. They don't care.
They're dead. They're never going to write, they're not going to write anything new.
Yeah. They don't care.
And I want new stuff, not new because it's new, but new because it progresses. And the world needs things now that are
Something
different.
I've been thinking about is most things I find in the conceptual space, the world of ideas, so to speak, falls into either one of 3 categories: philosophy, science, or art. Where does psychotherapy fall in? Do you consider it one of those? Is it like a mix or?
Well, it has a Venn diagram would have all 3 of them overlapping.
Yeah.
And I was, editor of the literary magazine in college. I was so much into art and literature and so forth that the reason I picked psychology is I thought, hey, I can care about stories and songs and stuff like that. And I can care about science and stuff like that. That's really cool. And I came to that as a sophomore in high school, and I never varied from it. And frankly, it was, it had about the amount of wisdom as any sophomoric idea had, but it turned out to be largely right. And, I still write songs, and I, still enjoy doing creative things, but I like playing the science game too. So, and, if you just look at how many in the psychotherapy space, this will seem like self-praise, but please forgive me. I'm 78 years old.
Forgiven.
Okay, thank you. In a couple of weeks, I'll be 78, and I guess I can do a little bit of this. But when ACT first landed, after 20 years of development, mostly in silence, because people didn't realize what I was trying to do, me and my team, as we were working out what the processes are, how to measure them, and philosophy of science. We're doing a lot of philosophy of science work. And we came up with this thing called functional contextualism, which is a modern face of pragmatism, basically. That solves a lot of problems of pragmatism, in my opinion, and of evolutionary epistemology more generally. But when it landed hard because Time magazine wrote it up in a 5-page story. And you could go and there's a 2-page fold out with my face like this, in Time magazine, which at the time was a big deal. Now it's not, magazines aren't anything, but, and the reporter who wrote it, the late John Cloud, visited Tim Beck, Aaron Beck, father of CBT, 3 times before he could goad him into saying something stupid. I had called what we're doing part of the third wave of CBT. You ever heard that phrase? It's the third wave.
Like third wave of feminism. I know I've heard the phrase third wave in different
Well, in
contexts.
CBT, there's a third wave, which meant to go from first it's direct contingencies and all of that, the behavior therapy wave. Then it's no, detect, challenge, dispute, and change your cognitions. It'll change your emotions, change your behavior. And then a wave came that was no, change your relationship to your thoughts, feelings, etc., and focus on your values. And so, DBT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, metacognitive therapy, functional analytic psychotherapy, ACT. ACT is probably the best known and has by far the most evidence. We've got almost 1,500 randomized trials, and then the closest next, I think, is DBT with maybe 70, just to give you a sense of how far ahead we are in data. Mainstream CBT, 3,000 or so. Okay. So, but when it landed, boom, people couldn't understand it because the philosophy was so different. And they were mostly, common sense philosophy ends up being mechanistic or formistic. I'm using the terms that Stephen Pepper, who wrote a thing called World Hypotheses that I really like, a philosopher who was chair of both the Department of Art and Philosophy at Berkeley at the same time. And he was there when T.S. Kuhn was writing The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. If you know anything about Kuhnian ideas, you can see Pepper in Kuhn. But anyway, the CBT world had almost exploded because I don't think words correspond to things. I don't think that's not my truth criterion. I'm not trying to build a model of all the parts, relations, and forces that make us work. I'm just trying to get something done. And so I want concepts that allow us to predict and influence the behavior of whole organisms interacting in and with a context considered historically and situationally. That's the psychological level, in my opinion. And I kind of worked out how we could do this as pragmatists. Well, that's basically James and Dewey and the rest. But James and Dewey and the rest made a big, big error because they didn't say, they said that and Peirce and some of the others, they said that successful working was what was really important. And it was kind of new on the planet. The pragmatists were, you're not finding Greek pragmatists. You could find them kind of in there a little bit in the Stoics and stuff, but the real meat of it is pretty recent. And it came after Darwin because it was kind of the attempt to deal with Darwin realities. But what James did, and let's say the variety of religious experience, is say religion is true because it works, and then use examples. When you're facing death, it helps to be religious. Yeah, but if you use it that way, eating a Twinkie works.
Yeah.
Molesting children works. I mean, anything that has a reinforcer, you can say, hey, work for me. We can't build a science that way. And so we worked out how to do it. And you have to do it with pre-analytic goals that are publicly stated that you can measure and hold yourself accountable to. Well, and we do that in our little corner of the world. But the reason I'm telling this story is, if you read how much my writings in the 20 years from my night on the carpet, you can kind of look at my TEDx talk where I have this, I've developed a panic disorder, I hit bottom, and I have this out-of-body experience that tells me I have to stop running from anxiety and I have to run towards it. You can go look at YouTube and see it if you're interested.
I
Within
have.
a few months, I'm working on that. I'm not telling my lab. They don't even know I have a panic disorder. I hid it from everybody. But anyway, when it lands 20 years later with the Time magazine thing, my big fat face in there, and there's a revolution happening and all that kind of stuff, the third wave, people were freaked out. But what we brought into the discussion of evidence-based therapy is, you better be really clear about your analytic assumptions, take responsibility for them, and take a good look if there's anything that looks incoherent, because if you have assumptions that conflict, you're not going to create a progressive research program. So as a philosophy of science, your assumptions have to be owned and coherent. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Well, that's what philosophy is, of science anyway, of science. And so
and in general, I mean, a big part of philosophy is,
I think in general, it's a hell of a lot easier to live a life that's coherent if you work out your assumptions.
Yeah.
But
people don't like, as for my shirt, it says Socrates on.
Cool.
It says Socrates corrupting the youth since 470 BC.
That's
so
awesome.
I guess that's what I'm doing here.
That's super cool.
Thank you.
Well, so anyway, when it lands, the evidence-based therapy folks can't understand what this weird thing of, noticing your thoughts. No, you're supposed to change them, etc. Well, because it was based on different analytic assumptions. And nowadays, there's been a term in evidence-based therapies by consensus when they come together, like the CBT world came together, and all different waves, and they agreed we should be teaching philosophy of science in all of our programs. That's a win, and frankly, I had something to do with it. And the CBS, Contextual Behavioral Science world, and that world had a big thing to do with it. And if I can tell a story, maybe it won't land well but Stefan Hoffman, one of my closest friends and closest colleagues, was a winner of the Beck Award, was the defender of the CBT world, and he wrote articles like "Act as Old Wine in New Bottles," and it's based on Merida therapy, which I didn't even know existed, and blah, 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 blah. Well, we're having debates and we're interacting, and he's starting to get it, and he's reading some of this stuff, and I'm there at the behavior therapy conference, a cognitive behavior therapy conference, Association for Advancement of Behavior Therapy at the time. Now it's called for Advancement of CBT, and I've been president of that group. And some people are just pounding on me because it's the early days of what happened after we got that amount of attention in Time magazine, where people feel like, oh my God, the house is burning down. There's people who are trying to destroy CBT. And Steph watching this, and he says to somebody who's literally yelling at me, who is an advocate of Albert Ellis, rational and motive behavior therapy, and REBT. I don't know if you come across it, but he's dead now. But Stefan says, you don't understand. They have a different philosophy of science. I'm thinking, yes, even my enemies, who became my friend later, are beginning to get it. You gotta get clear on your philosophy. So we spent a lot of time on the philosophy side, and the art side in psychotherapy, man. There's an art to creating a therapeutic alliance and reading people, but we need science to line up with that.
I mean, speaking of the interpretive part of therapy in general. It seems that ACT seems to try to target these processes by using kernels, right?
Yeah, we've come really to emphasize the importance of personalization and kernelization.
So how does the practitioner determine which kernels to use? And maybe you could talk a little bit about what I mean by kernels.
Yeah, so here's what we've discovered. This is a little geeky science. Let's see if I can make it not too geeky. Is that everybody's different, and evidence-based processes that are based on bell curves and standard deviations, the ensemble aggregate statistics that most of us think is all of what science is, don't tell you the path dependence of a particular person. And they can't, because it violates its own mathematical assumptions. And you're a mathematician. You may even love reading some of the stuff. Read a work that we call Idionomics, Idionomic, idionomic, which is a made-up word that means idiographic and then nomothetic. Nomothetic means general laws. Idiographic tell the stories of a particular person, couple, or family. Well, it turns out when you do aggregate statistics, this is from Galton forward, they thought that where you land, your percentile rank, blah, 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 foretells your future. That's only true if the phenomena is ergodic. Well, noble gases, a few of them, are ergodic. Almost nothing biological is ergodic. Ergodicity, and I can explain why, I can give the math of it, but I can give you the common sense of it, requires, when you have an ensemble or a group of a whole bunch of stuff, that there's no trends and that the same dynamic model applies to all of them. Well, if we were treating frozen...
What is I've heard the word ergodicity in the context of stochasticity. I know it's related to dynamical systems, but I don't know what it means. It
sure is, absolutely. And it's used in statistical physics. It's been around since 1880 something, and it's been proven back-to-back issues of the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in 1930-31 by world-class mathematicians, von Neumann and Birkhoff. And nobody in physics questions it.
What is it?
Well, it basically says, it's basically the relationship between time and space, and it's used in all kinds of phenomena like water systems and stuff like that in physics. But it wasn't only 20 years ago that a guy named Peter Molinar noticed that, wait a minute, this applies to human beings. Because, give you an example of what what they were dealing with when they first came up with it. So they're trying to figure out how to know what molecules of gas do. Yeah, but you can't measure them at the time, 1880s. But you can measure a volume of gas. You can put it under pressure, you can heat it up, and then you can measure what happens. What does that tell you about what the molecules are doing, each and every one? Well, it tells you a lot if there's no trends and the same dynamic model applies anywhere. Now, here's the way it was done with volume of gas. Let's say you put a sensor, and you'll see the common sense of it. Put a sensor in there. Let's say you have a volume of gas, and you put a sensor anywhere. If you measure what's going on that sensor, any phenomena that you're interested in, the behavior of the molecules that are in there, and the thing called a gas, right? No matter where you put the sensor, ultimately, it should have the same mean and standard deviation.
So it's a kind of uniformity.
Yeah, it's a homogeneity assumption, but on steroids. Furthermore, no matter where you put it, it should have the same. And if you follow it over time, each and every one, they should also be the same. Now think about why that would be. Suppose in one corner of the volume, it's a rising thing, like this thing's getting more and more and more and more active. Wait a minute, forever? Forever? What's going to happen to the volume? Is it going to explode? What is it? Something's weird's going on there. There must be heat over here and not over there or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then the heat, if there was, then it would have to kind of
Yeah, and
even
if it
out.
disperses and stuff, well, then ultimately it's not going to have a trend.
Yeah.
You can
So
have
ultimately,
variability.
ideal gases should be ergodic. They have to be very,
Yes,
very.
exactly. And some of them are. So it can have variability, but it shouldn't be around a rising or falling trend. And can you see that spatially, you can see why it's time and space. No
Yeah.
matter where you put the sensor, ultimately it should be the same. If the volume of, if this place and that place is different, or this one
Then
has a rising one and this is a falling one, well, then what's going on in there? You can't
yeah, there must
judge.
be some special
All right, now think
reasoning.
about this in terms of human beings. Let's say we're looking at processes. Processes are the small steps that you take, the Latin word for procession, that lift your life up or pushes your life down with regard to a specific goal, value, whatever. Okay, we just call them processes. If they have trends, that's kind of cool. Like, for example, in my whole life, I'm gradually learning to be more and more accepting. I'm gradually learning to step back from and notice my thoughts instead of being all entangled with them. I'm learning to be more flexible in my attention and be more mindful of what's around me. I'm doing a better and better job of that. That's a violation of ergodicity. Yeah, okay. Furthermore, are you like me? Are you exactly the same as me? In all of your, no. Who's exactly the same as anyone? No one.
No, even now, I'm not the same person I was like 2 seconds
Exactly.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah. The old thing, you can't step in the same river twice. And the answer is you can't step in the same river once. You can
Sorry.
see why. When I'm talking to people about this, I sometimes say, look at your tip of your finger, less than a square inch of skin. There's nobody else
Fit sorry.
nobody else on the planet has that fingerprint. When you do the math of it, if every speck of sand was a different person, how many specks of sand would you need to have any chance of finding a fingerprint like yours, less than a square inch of skin? And the answer is all the grains of sand on a million Earths. Now let's add in something like this. How about your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, your bodily sensations? I've done the math on this. Let's say a meaningful sentence. This with its attributes is related in this way to this thing with its attributes. The simplest sentence you can come up with. How many sentences like that are in your head? If you just have
A
an
lot.
average intelligence, when you do the math on it, and you can include negation of the whole rule and things like that, the answer is 10 to the 80th, which is more than there are molecules in the universe. It's, the idea that there's someone else like you in the universe or ever will be is ridiculous.
And yet we're all so similar. We're still
We have
based on the
features that are
same.
similar, but we're applying concepts that are based on bell curves and standard
Yeah.
deviations that assume ergodicity. The math assumes it, but never tests it because they didn't know that it's an assumption. I came across this about 5 years ago, and my research team is now, I just spent a whole day with Claude working on this. You know, the math of this thing is like, oh my God, the concepts you're trying to apply to your life, assume that they're normatively applicable. It's bullshit. They interact with everything. With your body, with your background, with your history. So how are you going to build general laws? We want general laws. The only way that I can think of to do it is the way the behavior analysts did it. Something like reinforcement works really well. It applies across life forms and lots of stimulus control, yes. Habituation, yes. You do it by modeling one organism with intensity, and then another, and then another. And when you've modeled them really well, you see if you can see the similar things across. So the particular first, the general second. What we tried to do was the aggregate first, then we can apply it particularly. No, you can't, because it has to be ergodic to do that. So if all of your randomized trials were on frozen clones, You should be really happy with our science of psychology. If you're not looking at trials of frozen clones, you should be really upset with our field, because like 95% of what we're doing has mathematical assumptions we can't meet. And that's just
So
not
then how would you
claim. I
even
can
do
show it to you.
how would you even do the science of psychology without aggregate statistics?
Well, the way to do it, I think, is high density longitudinal analyses of particular individuals, couples, families, organizations. It's not defined by the skin. Whatever the unit is, the smallest unit that you want to apply to, or an organ system, or a cell. I'm cool with any unit of complexity. But whatever that is, focus on it and watch it over time with measures that allow you to tap into how it functions. Come up with a principle. See how often that applies to others look that same way, and you'll find principles emerging. Let me give you an example. This is a real finding. Most people, when they get highly stressed, their values-based activity begins to fall away. If you actually look at your own behavior and your friends and stuff, you'll see.
Yeah, like if you get stressed, you're like, oh, that wasn't me. You know, they're like,
or they'll do things like, they'll attack their friends, or they'll complain, suddenly like, wait,
it's like you're a different person. Yeah.
Yeah, what's going on? They do selfish things, or they forget things. Maybe they forget to be on a podcast that they promised to be on. I don't know.
Who could
Something
it be?
happens, right? Okay. About 1 out of 12 people, if you follow them over time, when they get highly stressed, they do more values-based activity, but they're not happy about it. But when I first saw it, I thought, oh shit, these are just workaholics. No, they experience joy, happiness, etc. When their friends compliment them, when they're having fun, when they're playing games socially. But when the shit hits the fan, boy, do you want them in their groups, because they're just like, we're going to do it. Not because it's like, woohoo, that puts a smile on my face, but no, like, we're going to do it. We needed a name for them, so we called them Stoics. We've replicated it 3 times. Now, here's the point. If you take your normal science, they're invisible. The same data sets that we have, they're just error. They're just part of the standard deviation. If you follow them first, one at a time, and then you look at how to get a template that matches, it's like the experience I have, it's like what must have happened when there was a microscope and you could look into water and there's like things living in there.
Yeah, that's
there's
sick.
little things. Oh my God. And so we're starting to see, oh my God, there's like types of ways of being, but it's 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15, 1 out of 20. And it's important. I mean, it's important for them, but it's also important for us. We want some of those differences. Every fingerprint is different, but we want some folks who are the wild monkeys, not just the calm monkeys, the conservatives, and the ones who push the edges. We want that. And how do we get that in balance with groups? Well, that's a larger question. But my point being, how are we going to build a science? I think there are wings of science that do this. Some of neuro does it. Model the brain first before you look at connectivity. Why? Because every skull is different. There's people walking around with half of their brain ablated, but it happened early in their development, and they don't even know they only have half a brain because other parts of the brain took over the work. Do you know that? There's literally people
I
with half
remember
a brain.
reading this. There was this study where someone had like only 20% of their brain, like functional, and in France, but their like IQ is like 80, and they just were living a totally normal life. It was like a plumber or something.
Exactly. So, okay, so we've got to follow people over time, model what's going on, and then draw general principles from that. We call it idionomic. The first study ever done like that in clinical psychology was by a student of mine. We called it idiothetic. That was in 1987. And he was a not out black gay guy who wanted his story told. And we did a study on sexual arousal to nude males and females. At the time, we weren't allowed to ask about sexual orientation. The ethics committee wouldn't allow us to do it. But we brought them in for these assessments repeatedly over time, or we looked cross-sectionally at particular times. Well, everybody knows that self-report only correlates with overt behavior about 0.3, almost no matter what you do. It's about 0.3. If you look within the person over time, it was about 0.7. And they responded to variables differently. So here's my point. You know, when somebody says, I'm really aroused, are they looking at their own idiographic? Yeah, that's what they're doing. But that's not what the sexologists are doing. They're getting a whole bunch of people and going, and then often there's no relationship there. Yeah, because you didn't model it in a way that gave people a chance to have a voice. Now think about this in terms of diversity. I'll give you an example. In positive psychology, the way Marty Seligman arranged it, it led from values to virtues. And he listed them. Here are the virtues. All right. I spent about a year talking to indigenous peoples in Canada, knowledge keepers, with a Cree friend of mine who introduced me and allowed me to talk about ACT and the work they did. They have a model of values, and it's not the same for every tribe, but it's in most. And I'm especially relying on the Cree, but it has 7 parts to it. And it includes things like rocks are alive. It includes things like the word in Cree for your great-grandfather is the exact same word as for your great-grandson. Not because they're confused, but because you are not just one person. You are 6 generations at once. What are you talking about? You're talking about what they understand. Are you going to be sitting there and saying, oh, your virtues are on my list of white Protestant European virtues? Come on, why are we doing that to people? Because it's in psychometrics. It's in the stupid way that we've built our psychological knowledge. So you asked about this issue of kernelization and personalization. And in ACT, this is very cutting edge. It's been the last 10 years that we've been chasing it, the last 4 or 5 years with knowledge of ergodicity. And that's, my head exploded when I found that out. So here's what this means. If somebody's trying to sell you on the one-size-fits-all solution to your life, hey, from this point of view, you just need to do this. Here's the list. Just smile and walk away. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. There are things in there that might be useful, but you're going to have to vet it your way. And, you know, if you look at things, you see it all around you. One person says, hey, if I eat this, it's great. Another person says, oh my God, if I eat that, I'm hungry all day. You know, let me tell you a story. I like nuts, and nutritionally, they're kind of cool, but I've noticed that some nuts, if I eat them, I want more, and then I want more, and then I want more, and then I want more. And I've tried it out over and over again, and I kind of settled, okay, walnuts are pretty good for me. If I have some walnuts, I'm satisfied, and I'm not jonesing for more, more, more. Sure enough, here comes the randomized trial. I swear there is such one. ACT plus walnuts for dealing with weight issues. And it worked out pretty well. My point being, or here's another one, you know, so my brother was 55 and I was 3 years old. So that would mean 27 years ago or something. I realized I was gaining a pound a year no matter what I did. And I weighed 245 pounds. Right now I weigh about 192. And so I said, well, I'm just going to renegotiate my relationship with hunger. I'm an ACT guy. Hunger doesn't have to be my dictator. I'll just make friends with hunger. And when am I hungry? Well, when I wake up. Okay, so I'm not going to eat anything until noon. And the first few months, man, oh God, I have to, have to. And then I only got hungry at noon. It just went away, which kind of disturbed me because say, wait a minute, I want to renegotiate my relationship with hunger, and now hunger's just going away. Yeah, but then the data started coming in on daily fasting, and of only eating within an hour window. I had this rule: I can start eating at noon, and I stop at 9. I'm not rigid about it, but I've lived 27 years or whatever doing that. Do I know that that's really great and stuff? No, but I was just watching my body. Here's what I'm saying to you. Everybody's different. We can work out some of the general principles, but we're going to have to collect data in a way. And I think individuals, I've been doing this myself. I record data on myself. I have a little app that asks me questions. I word the questions in ways that are meaningful to me. Excuse me for living if you don't understand what they mean. I don't care. I understand what they mean. And then after I get a couple months data, I apply these new statistical tools we've developed in my team, and I see things in my life. So I was working on one where here was my goal. Here was the item. I hear music like a flute. Am I psychotic? No. Is that on any approved scale that is vetted by what? The consistency between people who are what? Undergraduates in universities. Let's be honest. In other words, you can't even measure human behavior unless you genuflect in front of psychometrics, which is built on the ergodic error. I can walk you through the math of it. No, I'll explain what it means, and you know what it means. When I want to work on being more in the flow of being able to have fun, contribute, and do loving things for my kids and my wife, and take care of my health, and, change the world as best I can in the time that I got. And when I'm in the flow like that, it's like I'm hearing music. What kind of music? Oh, kind of like a flute. It's not like boom, boom, boom. It's sort of like, you know what flutes sound like?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I want my days to be kind of like that. It'll never be on anyone's scale. Anyway, well, I do this for 2 months, and I look at it, and sure enough, it tells me some stuff. Like one of the items, it tells me, my friends laughed when I shared it with them. I need to focus on self-care more. Well, they laugh because they know I turn into a workaholic. I'm just working, and I get working so hard, I'm not even eating, and I'm, like not taking care of my friends, not talking to my kids, not checking in with my wife. I'm just,
Yeah.
That's not hearing the music like a flute. But when is it? Turns out a bunch of other things in there, but the biggest one, statistically, within me, was self-care. That little kid exercise we did, what would that hug look like? If you really were giving yourself a hug, what would you do tomorrow? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out, and that never even occurred to that. It was more like, to me, it was more like, oh, I really have to, get up there and talk to my wife because otherwise she's feeling I'm ignoring her. And that's not the flute music, dude. That's the wagging finger. You will do that. You will go up there. You will push back from the computer and go up there. If you attend to what really brings vitality to you, take care of yourself. You want love in your life. You want fun in your life. You want connection in your life. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So personalization in the ACT world is gradually binding up with the science. And I think by the time we finish it, almost anybody who's really interested in behavior change will have some tools they can use. And if you don't want to be part of the ACT-y thing, that's cool. Just collect data on yourself and use some of these cool tools we've developed. And we'll teach you how to do it. how to think of your life in a way that you can measure things like that.
Yeah, what
Do it in your
tools do
own
you
words.
use?
Hmm?
What tools do you use to keep track of your life in that statistical
Well, we
way?
have a commercial app called PsychFlex, and inside it is an app that the private nonprofit I'm president of owns called Mindgrapher. So this is not a commercial, but I tried to interest various folks in creating these things, and I couldn't do it, so I raised money and we created it ourselves. It's a little kludgy. I wish I had about $400,000 to really make it much more slick, but I don't want to chase venture capitalists and all the problems they bring. So we'll see if I can. But meanwhile, there's about 1,000 people using it, and about I don't know 20,000 clients using. There are 10,000. We have several 100,000 data points in there in our database. So we're not a roaring success, but we're trying to figure out. Meanwhile, we are actually figuring out. So if somebody else has an awesome app, you can go to R and get the programs that we're using for free. If you know R, and as a mathematician, you probably do, to do the new stats.
The coding language.
Yeah, cool. Well, if you can do a high density longitudinal coding, you can put it through some more. In fact, the name of the CRAN R program is Idionomics. I spelled it earlier. It's accepted part of R. You can load it up and run your own stuff. All you got to do is feed it longitudinal data on you. And there's lots of for free ecological momentary assessment apps out there, or you can just write it down on a sheet and put it in Excel and upload it. And it's kind of an extended mindfulness exercise. And there's an old literature on the reactivity of self-monitoring. And myself and Rosemary Nelson in the early 80s were still some of the best theories, I think, work that we did that long ago. And one of the things that happens is when you start looking at your life in that detailed way, like twice a day scoring, was I hearing music like a flute or whatever, you really sort of fits with what you want.
Yeah.
It starts changing immediately. Because it's just like, oh, yeah, I could do that. So it's very much bottom up. So your answer to how we go from processes to kernels, some of that is right there as close as your fingers. Because you're doing stuff all the right time, like the food you pick, the movies you watch, the things you spend time on. How's that working for you? Well, if you watch carefully, your life will teach you. Maybe you don't need an expert to give you the answer. Maybe you just need to listen. To who? To you. And maybe also that little kid who wants to be seen and who brought tears to your eyes to think of what he really wanted. And maybe that's a place to end.
Yeah, I think it is. Okay, I have to ask. Well, I don't. I think you actually already answered it. At the end of every interview, I usually ask, do you have any life advice for me? But I think I've gotten enough. You can answer if you want.
What I just said.
Or you decline to answer.
What I just said, yeah, dig down to that vulnerable part of you that's old and soft and sometimes not seen. And allow yourself to be seen by yourself. And allow that little kid to have a conversation with you about what he really wants, what he really needs. And listen with big, mindful ears. And it's probably not the first words out of his mouth. A, he doesn't know how to express it, and B, he hasn't been listened to probably for a lot. So, sometimes you have to really make sure that, that part of you knows that it's safe. You're not going to, don't tell me that, no. I really want to know. I really want to know. And you'll find inside you yearnings for things, like for belonging and for a connection and for contribution and competency and feeling and knowing where you are. And I wrote a book about it Where is it? That guy. Not a commercial. Been around for a while. It's done pretty well. A liberated mind. And it kind of walks through some of these yearnings that are underneath, uh, you know, how we can develop in ways that really serve our own personal evolution and the people of those around that we love around us.
Thank you for
Thank you.
joining. Yeah.
Much appreciated. Peace, love, and life.